I want to get your thoughts on this because we just saw Zoran Mamdani become mayor in New York City, running on a campaign promising to make life more affordable. And now you've got Donald Trump being kind of grilled on the economy there in that interview. And I'm not sure about his answer, if it's really convincing, if Americans are really feeling the pinch. 70% of them say they're really worried about their financial situation. I think, does Donald Trump need to do more work here?
So there are some kernels of truth definitely in what President Trump just said to Lori Ingraham. For instance, energy prices definitely have gone down, and inflation overall right now, which is hovering around 3% at the moment, it's certainly in a better place than it was at for large swaths of the Biden administration, where it reached a high of 9.1% back in the summer of 2022, just over 3 years ago. So there are definitely some kernels of truth, but unfortunately in that answer, Gabrielle, if I'm being very candid here, and I say this as a conservative, as someone who has voted for President Trump multiple times, he's sounding a little bit like Joe Biden, actually, to be honest with you, where he's basically saying that my economy is great. The American people just don't see it. It's kind of this attitude that the American people aren't appreciating what we're doing there. That's not a good look for a politician in general when you start to say that the voters just don't appreciate necessarily what I'm doing. A better tactic, a more tried and true tactic, is to actually listen to the American people and to try to meet them where they are. So that CNBC poll that you showed there, 77%. Feel some sort of financial anxiety. I saw a separate poll just a week or two ago that currently 67%, give or take, roughly 2/3 of Americans currently live paycheck to paycheck, something that the business class, the laptop class just frankly doesn't even think about there. These are real concerns. And frankly, yeah, inflation is overall lower, but it's still 3%. That's still at least 1% higher than the Federal Reserve says it should be. And there's all sorts of data to indicate that younger millennials and Gen Z folks here in America in particular are achieving all these major all these major lifetime milestones at an older age when it comes to first-time home ownership, things like that. So they're big home ownership decisions. They're big. All these economic decisions are all delayed. So there's real reason to be concerned. So overall, I do think that the president ignores that to his peril.
Yeah, and that is so important for young people. You know, they want to be able to at least believe and have goals to buy a home, to have a family. It's so important. And Alex, you know, so many people do vote with their wallets. Are you concerned looking at those polling numbers?
Yeah, I am. And if I were in the White House, I'd be concerned as well. I know that they are, and that they are pivoting to this issue of affordability. And we had a poll result about, are you going to spend more money or less in the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday? And the number of people said less was 30%, more was 23%. And to me, that's a pretty decent story of what the economy looks like right now. There's some people that are doing pretty well. It's a minority. It's not that many. Most people are doing a little bit worse or treading water and just fine. That's not a great place for the economy to be. It feels tepid to people. And so Trump does have good victories to point to in his administration. He's accomplished a lot. That is unequivocally true.
Absolutely.
Done that on the border. He's done that on peace deals. But you don't necessarily get a reward from the voters for the victories that you've achieved. You just get another assignment. And so the voters ultimately care more about how they're feeling in their pocketbook and their bank account than world peace, even though that is unequivocally important. That is objectively relevant. It matters, but does it matter to Americans? I don't think that people necessarily know that.
Well, while we're speaking about the economy, plenty of people, you know, struggling at the moment. Jasmine Crockett, it's been revealed, has spent nearly $75,000 on luxury hotels, transportation and security this year in cities across the United States. Documents show that her campaign spending totaled more than $25,000 since January on hotels and limousine services. And here she is complaining about the cost of security.
I think that it's really a good question as to why a member of Congress needs to pay for security out of money that they go and raise, instead of focusing on making sure that they use that money to educate voters about why it is that their candidacy matters. I do think that it does people like me a disservice when you are so outspoken. And then what happens is, instead of you being able to put all your dollars into campaigning, instead, you've got to do things like pay for your security. But I kind of value my life, so it is what it is.
Josh, I mean, she's upset about spending money for security after repeatedly calling to defund the police. She's certainly not the only one that has to pay for security either.
Yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy is just utterly galling, is not? I mean, here is a woman who has become a very high-profile member of the House Democratic Caucus. By the way, Gabrielle, I'm still waiting for Jasmine Crockett to try to kick out Ayanna Pressley to be the Ringo Starr of the squad. I mean, you don't really hear a whole lot about Pressley these days. You hear a lot about AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib. I think that Jasmine Crockett is trying to make a play there to be the final member of the squad. She clearly has higher aspirations than her current backbencher house perch. But I mean, to complain, to cavil about using your private money on your security, how about all the Americans who can't afford that? I mean, talking here
know.
about what 99.99999% of Americans who can't afford private security. But oh, by the way, it's actually worse than that because, as you said, Jasmine Crockett wants to defund the police, the number one easiest, most reliable way in American history of actually having security. Oh, wait, you don't want to have police? How about at least your right to actually protect your home, aka the Second Amendment? Oh, wait, she opposes that too. So she opposes the police. She opposes your ability to actually buy and lawfully secure and train with a firearm to defend your family, your home, and all that. But meanwhile, she has the chutzpah to say that her own private security detail has to come from her own campaign funds. I mean, the gross entitlement and privilege, to use one of the American left's favorite buzzwords, is just utterly astonishing there. And it's one of the many reasons why I think Jasmine Crockett, I cynically, as someone who wishes the Democratic Party nothing but the worst, I kind of hope that they actually elevate her more and more because she's just so crazy and she says just the darndest things that will only redound against their interests in the mid to long term.
Alex, as a polling guy, I want your thoughts on what her kind of messaging would do for her and what would happen if she gets kind of promoted throughout the Democrat Party.
I totally agree with Josh. I hope very much that Jasmine Crockett goes onto the campaign trail, whether she runs for Senate in Texas or just re-election in her own seat, and she talks to Texas voters about the terribly unfair high cost of her security. I think that will just get a lot of sympathy. I think that every family has their grocery bill, they have their diaper bill, and they have their security bill. And so she should talk about that. I think the voters want to hear about that more than anything else.
Look, finally, let's just finish with what's happening in the UK because British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been forced to address reports that rivals within the Labour Party are conspiring to replace him as leader just 2 weeks before the government budget is announced, which of course could further worsen his already abysmal popularity. Now, several British media outlets have quoted Starmer's allies as saying his position could be in imminent danger. Alex, looking at the polls and looking at Keir Starmer's popularity, it has absolutely plummeted in a really short period of time since July 2024. A YouGov poll said that this month only 17% of people in the UK actually approve of Starmer's performance, just 17%, while 73% disapprove. Also, Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, it just keeps leading in the national polls. What do you make of the reports that Keir Starmer has now been forced to address those reports that there are others conspiring to replace him as leader?
It's hard to think of a worse position that you could be in politically than Keir Starmer right now, and with one of the biggest majorities of any leader in the world. It's pretty incredible. And so I'm surprised that he's lasted this long. I think that there was no world in which he lasted until the next election. I think that was true many, many months ago, if not longer. If they're going to lose, and it looks very much like that will happen, the election's far away. They might as well do something with that majority between now and then. And so if I were a Labour member, then I would want to replace him and come in and at least accomplish something with that agenda. I don't know who's going to replace him, though. And I worry that the person will be quite a bit worse. It's hard to imagine how it could be worse than Keir Starmer, but got some good ones in that Labour Party.
Josh, it's pretty amazing looking at what Donald Trump has been able to do in America compared to Keir Starmer. I mean, since Trump came in, he closed the border, essentially, and he's been deporting millions of illegals. And you look at what's happening in the UK, and they're still in such a bad position with their immigration crisis.
The UK is a total disaster right now. It's an utter shambles. It brings me no pleasure to say that, Gabriella. I'm something of an Anglophile. I lived briefly in the UK. I am a profound admirer of all that the English people have brought to the world when it comes to the common law, when it comes to separation of powers, when it comes to political liberty and justice, more defined than a modern context. They've given, especially the Anglophone world, they've given us all so much. So it's just horrific to see the country in this shape. I have friends in London who I talk to. There's one friend of mine who I talk to on a fairly regular basis. he is on the precipice of leaving because it has just gotten so utterly unbearable at this time in London. The silver lining, Gabriella, as you alluded to, is that it looks like if an election were held tomorrow, that Nigel Farage could actually become the next prime minister of the UK. I had the pleasure of seeing Nigel speak in Washington just a couple of months ago. We used to run Nigel Farage's op-eds regularly in Newsweek. I used to edit his op-eds, so I've been familiar with his work for many years now. In my opinion, he's one of the great unsung conservative heroes, not just in modern British history, but in all of modern European history. He was essentially the guy behind Brexit. What he was able to accomplish there is phenomenal. The fact that he is now having this comeback from his cable news broadcast days to be the new face of the British right is an amazing, amazing story. So if this story has any happy ending whatsoever for the UK, and I really, really hope it does, because again, I'm genuinely an Anglophile, it's not going to come via Keir Starmer. It's not going to come via the Labour Party. It's not going to come via the Tories either, by the way. They have a lot of their own problems as well. It's probably going to have to come from Nigel Farage. So let's see what happens. I'm certainly praying for it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Josh Hammer, Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, and Alex Tarascio, Cygnal Principal and Pollster. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.